Yama, welcome and thank you all for coming. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Gamilaroi people. I recognise their continuing connection to this land and pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal people here today. Now, and again, thank you for coming to our author talk and poetry reading. So, Peter Langston, Poems of a Social Distance. I'll just read out a few quotes that we have here from what people have said about Peter's work. So Simon Joyce, Independent Schools Foundation, Hong Kong. Profound with a wide range of emotions, from quiet chuckle to a roar of laughter. Highly enjoyable, excellent creative artistry. Andrew Davis, CEO of a major research organisation, says, a worthy and challenging companion to Peter's previous volumes. You can open it at any point and be made to smile or move uneasily in your seat. Colin Sheridan, Doctor of Philosophy. Peter's poetry provides me with a much-needed antidote to the last few years. His skill is to re-engage readers with the richness of being engaged with others. And Rev Simon Hansford, who some of you may have heard of. Peter knows about mercy, and there are generous threads of it in his work. Mercy begets hope, and hope is the stuff of life. This is how a poem lifts from a type and infects you with its possibilities. Ellie Brown, Brownie's mum and Armadale. I was so engrossed with the poetry that I burnt the nectarine as I was student.
It's my favourite.
It comes from the heart. And I'd like to introduce to the stage Rev Simon Hansford.
Good afternoon, everyone. I pay my respects too to the elders past and present of the Gamilaroi Nation for the way they've stewarded the good earth on which we gather, the lands and waters which make up this country. I extend that respect to the other Indigenous people, past and present, and in particular to any First Nations people who are present with us today. The mountain light is dimming, the air thickening, wetting my nostrils as I breathe. Rumbles roll up the valleys below, gliding with the cliffs I lean on and bursting as echoes. I bought a book of poetry just this week while we were away in the mountains, and the quote at the beginning of the book of poetry is a quote from Bertolt Brecht, who says, "What does it mean to say we said something? What does it mean to say we said something?" An image came through my Twitter feed just yesterday, and the image is of a young woman on her knees, her head bowed at the edge of a cliff, and off the edge of the cliff is a soldier holding a large baton and just holding her hair as they try to reach up to beat her with the baton, and she's holding a pair of scissors and she's about to cut the final foot off her hair. From the Iranian women's protests that are happening right now in Iran, and a lot of anonymous women are just posting these images online. When we talk about poetry and creativity, we don't speak into a vacuum. We speak into a space where art and music and poetry, where drawings that have been around for 1,000 years, or drawings that are as new as this morning, inspire us and challenge us and ask questions of us and bless us with humour and with hope. So it's a question from Bertolt Brecht about what we say and what we mean and who we are. Or an Iranian woman facing death for simply unclasping her hair in the street and talking about it in a way that inspires others. Whether it's simply a story or a song that makes us laugh or makes us cry, we are in this place. We live in a world of weaseled words, where words are slippery and mean hardly anything. They are mechanical or formulaic or structured to avoid answering the question or to push the question away entirely. I work in the church, and we have this constant tension working in a space in the office where some folk talk in churchy kind of language and some folk speak in business kind of language, but never the two shall meet, and they clash and they rub, and often, sadly often, the business kind of language seems to win out. We have visibility of things, and we oversight things, and we workshop things. Whatever that means at all, I have no idea, but it seems to me something terribly important because we use the language all the time. Workshopping, visibility, we talk about paradigms and cascading and a whole range of things that seem to mean something that nobody actually understands and we can't quite grasp. Or we watch our sports or something else and hyperbole is the only measure of anything. Something's always extraordinary, it can never just simply be good. Something's always amazing or appalling, it can't simply be something that we observe that is bad or middling or something such. And we listen all the time to politicians and business people and journalists who are strangling language each time they speak. Metaphor and rhyme are entirely out the window, and we are stuck with language that says almost nothing to avoid challenge or difficulty or actually saying something. And speaking on behalf of my colleagues, it's occasionally true too of the church. Often language too does all it can to avoid beauty. So we water it down or mechanic it up so it doesn't actually say the things we need it to say. And I was reminded as I was writing this about Dickens' book Hard Times, and there's a character in there, a children's educator called Child, whose task is to make sure children learn how to behave, and that's all that it is, and they're fitted into a box, a certain size and shape, and that's the way the world is. And his name has stuck with me despite the fact that I was forced to read the book in year 7. And we speak in atonal phrases, language that actually invites nothing but boredom, or a glance away, or simply the decision to no longer listen, which of course in some cases, and in some places with some people, that's the deliberate design, that they won't actually listen any further, but simply stop or become bored and have no sense of where we're going at all. And the current politician's wonderful, wonderful line, when asked a question, but not accepting the premise of your question. I heard the brand new Prime Minister of England and she solely sinks into the mire, and I was asked a question and she said, I don't accept the premise of your question, and the interviewer said, well, why not? And for one brief shining moment, my heart leapt and thought, here, we've cracked open the shell of trying to find our way through language. And as I said before, I'm on Twitter, and 240 characters or Facebook posts about our breakfast on one hand, or our mum dying on the other, find their way onto the stream as if they're all the same thing and all equally important and equally valuable. And of course they're not. But in 240 characters or less, it all seems to be part of the same casserole. It's not so much how many you use, it's not so much how you use them, it's about when. Manning Clark, an historian famous in Australia and perhaps further afield, talked in his histories about straighteners and enlargers. Not the ones who make things straight, but the ones who straighten people's lives and communities' lives and cultures' lives and the nation's life, and the ones who enlarge it. And he talks about those who straighten things to such an extent that everything becomes strangled and smaller and lesser and greyer. And he talks about the fellowship of the deprived. And sometimes the task of those up the front, at the microphone or on the page, is to straighten everything so that everything becomes grey. And your mum's death and your breakfast become one and the same importance. And nothing is valuable. Or perhaps even worse, everything seems to be. Every cycle sings xenophone singing in the voice of Hanrahan, Peter tells us. Every cycle sings xenophone singing in the voice of Hanrahan. So we come to talk about poetry and this poet and this book in particular. And the role of poets in many ways is simply to be enlargers and not straighteners. The ones who come and invite us in, who surprise us and challenge us and annoy the hell out of us and bless us with the questions or the poetry or the poem that doesn't quite sit with us, but sits on the page, or the ones that sit entirely inside us and move us along, or the ones that invite us forward step by step by step further along. The poets who enlarge how we understand the world, or ourselves, or our community, or our breakfast, or our basket. How we understand the world around us and our place within it, or sometimes, and Peter's probably does this for us too, our place sometimes without it. Why we sit on the edge, or don't feel we belong, or don't want to belong, or are told we have no place. Poets are enlargers who speak with beauty and timbre and cadence and sometimes stop. And we stumble over and trip ourselves up trying to find a way into the language that is used and invites us. Invites us, as C.S. Lewis says, further up and further in. And if you read the poems that catch you, and sometimes the ones that don't quite the first time, we discover more and more, as we do in Peter's poetry, of things that speak to us about this place and that place, this town or those people or those lives that we know. It's a great place to pay, or perhaps to doze away, says Peter. And then this wonderful poem, the end of which really cool. Hardness can only be what it was formed to be, but it breaks. Breaks the bones, the spirit, the love of those who misconstrued, those who bled to plead, for promises to be kept, for chains that never came, for softness to infect before death, between a rock and a hard man's place, where a wounded knee still bleeds. What it means to be hard or soft in a world in which we are told to be strong and courageous, or to open up entirely, and is there some middle ground in which to stand and find our way? We're told to be soft and open, and then when we are, someone beats us or ignores us or laughs at us, so we harden up and try to find our way that way, and we swing and roundabout our way through the story of our lives. Poets testify to a larger and more colourful story, perhaps just around us, perhaps over the next hill, or the next song, or the next person we might meet, inviting us into a larger and more wonderful world. If you read Peter's poems, please don't read them one after the other from page 1 to the end. Sprinkle yourself around the story and find your way. Make sure you dog ear the pages that Peter feels more valued and thought. This week is the 10th anniversary of Julia Gillard's misogyny speech in the Parliament. 10 years since that was. And wherever you are stand on the political stage, the reason it was famous and remains so, the reason it struck a chord and remains so to do, it's been made into a modern song, is because it had rhythm and timbre and rhyme and repetition like any good poem does. And it asked something of us, and we could see ourselves being addressed as she spoke and challenged and railed against the misogyny of the world and the man across the table from her. You see, the best of speeches and the best of sermons and the best of songs and the best of poems, and we brush against them in Peter's book. Tell us something about ourselves and help us tap our toe or our heart on the wheel. Those who know Peter are not at all surprised by the occasional appearance of what I put in brackets, snarky kinds of humour. Meanwhile, in the middle of the Barclay tableland, couples on the other side of midnight begin parking their investments in surplus for safety. 250 kilometres from nowhere, investments with little or no resale value. What they call community, others might call a powerful need for recreating the urban landscape out the back in the red dirt of the most remote outpost of the cult of the big Aussie loop. Smells like Dinkerway. Smells like aging teen spirit. Take a good whiff. Smells like fear. Fiona and I have camped and watched those whopping great mothers of vans back themselves into their circles of something, or their triangles, their rectangles of something, and watched and thought, here we go again. And when Peter wrote that, I thought, I have actually parked in I have sat in that camping space and watched them roll in and know exactly what he's talking about. And we have made perhaps less humorous and more snarky comments as they did so. And on one long trip, we in fact found ourselves playing tag team with them and thought we just have to stop here for a day until they can let you get away from us. We face the world as it is in Peter's Park, and as we are. And we do it as much as possible. Of course, with the poets, there's some sense of fantasy or inviting to something beyond us slightly. But most of the time with Peter's poems, we know where we are and who we are and that of which he says. I'm okay. I wasn't. I don't sleep well, but I worry in vivid colours. I have anxiety. And each of us either knows that story for ourselves, or as a person that we love, or several persons that we love who tell this story in different kinds of ways. But how they face the day, or the week, or their life, or simply getting out of bed, and the echoes for us invite us once again to hear Peter's poems in a way that remind us of the lives that we live, and sometimes we didn't have to. I wrote in the foreword, there are journeys which require more of us, and with the invitation we find ourselves less likely to remain at a convenient distance from our fears, whether they are catastrophes laced with courage, like the fires in our aftermath in Who Reigns, Reigns, or the ruminations of how we care for those we love in redemption. This is where Peter's words particularly engage me, because they have some resonances, both comfortable and uncomfortable, with how I view the world, or even when I'm wary of doing it. I forgot to warn you at the beginning that Peter told me I could speak for as long as I liked. And to say that to a preacher is a large and dangerous mistake. No, of course not.
You misheard me. I said as long as I like.
So let me tie this with perhaps a bow at the end. In all of the poems that I've written, several again today and this morning and last night, the poems that struck me most in this reading are the poems with the tenderness within. Perhaps it's my time of life, or this time of week, or this time of the story that I tell. And when the time came, there are echoes for me of Les Murray's poem about his father's death. Don't die, Dad, but they die. And there are echoes there for me too about my father's own increasing faith, going from an extraordinary, courageous and strong and outgoing and articulate man to one who is less so day by day and step by step as he finds his way in life. He's still fine, but he isn't the man that he was in the way that I understood him when I was young and trying to find my own way, and he offered a willing hand in shaking. You, author of the largest case of my defining memories. You, my first teacher of life's lessons. You, the model I so often ignored in order to demand individuality. You, who shaped the first me and tolerated subsequent renditions. You, who never seemed to get old until it was too late. This story that we have in one way or another, all told or found for ourselves, or someone we love or are loving now, who are not quite who they were, or are finding themselves not quite who they imagined themselves to be, and we find a way in sadness and in grief and in wonder and in thanks, a way forward. And in the poem that Peter writes, the resolution with the scripted writing as well as the story in itself help us understand our place in history. And I wanted to end being almost 12 months, just over 12 months since Lindsay's death, a story that Peter and I have shared together in different kinds of ways, and mostly in sadness, but in several times of thankfulness. About Lindsay, who died just over 40. Yeah, probably. And this wonderful poem in the book ends with, don't think how he played. Don't think on how he played. Think on how he made you feel. And for me, the story of Lindsay came back strong and warm and sad. And I thought too about the stories that Peter and I have shared about Lindsay and our sadness and our thankfulness for her. But I thought too about these best of poems. These poems that Peter plays for us and invites us to listen to, and how we respond. When Brett says, "What does it mean to say we said something?" May I assert to you as carefully and as clearly as I can that Peter has said something. Thank you.
Well, we better hear some poems. Any of the Simons left. When I'm happy, I write. When I'm lonely, I write. When the wind brushes past me and tingles the hair on my skin, I write. When I'm sad, I write. When I'm in a crowd, I write. When I ache to belong but hide in my own company, I write. When I think, therefore I am, I write. When there's movement at the station, I write. When there's the best of times or the worst of times, I write. When Australians all let us rejoice, I write. I don't belong, or laugh with friends, or boldly go where no one has gone before. I just entertain these noisy ideas and seek to trap them on a page to be read or ignored in measures over which I have no control, so I don't have to hold them closer and be worn out in the process. I have self-isolated for 20 years, gladly, because I have no other skills. So I launched these probes to an outside world, telling it of my inside world to unsurprising ends. It's all I can do. More often than not, it's enough. You heard this before. Gondwana. The mountain light is dimming, the air thickening, wetting my nostrils as I breathe. Rumbles roll up the valley below, colliding with the cliffs I lean on and bursting as echoes. Snapshots of Arctic beach with lichen and moss passengers are captured in lightning milliseconds. Old water drips in eon-aged monotony from the edge of sky and cliff. Hooling for covert birds, sneak sipping from the soft green pads, surely too fragile to survive this place. In the Gondwana rainforest where only eagles are free to come and go, everywhere is creeping grins. Reaching out for a fallen branch, a displaced rock, or a visitor dwelling too long over a sandwich. Here's a love poem. I can't have Sue in the room and not do a love poem. It's probably a love poem which shows our experience. Autumn dancing. If love is a dance, we two wallflowers sit to one side, content to watch time and bad news condemning us. Our best muster is to hold hands in memorial intent, as the young and inexperienced bump and grind and sweat to the rock and roll and groan their physical graffiti across the social landscape like dogs scent marking territory. More athleticism and romance. Some old man sneers in my voice. You squeeze my hand at the memory, then verbally near some rival recollection, whispered with intent in my good ear, leaving me with the manners to smile and nod, despite only hearing fragrance, as you chose the wrong ear. That's the dance these days. Having known each other so well for so long in such exclusivity, with such glorious intensity, intent is enough. Comfort is sufficient. That covering for each other's mishaps, all the new totality, the temperament of love produced in a heartbeat. Hands which improbably held a raging inferno are still warm and holding on tight. As two wallflowers stick to one side, rewarded, watching the dance. By the way, if anyone's wondering about the protocol, I break protocol with poetry here because I have a fragile ego. If you wish to clap after each poem, please do. What's good enough for musicians, Kevin?
100%. I haven't experienced that yet.
I don't give them the option to boo. Okay, this is another love poem, a different one. It's called Once a Month. Don't go there. It was romantic the first time, an investment well spent, but each subsequent visit I only reluctantly went. To market, to buy someone's junk, a Captain Cook teaspoon, a junk of it shrunk, flowing bright wraparounds like they sell them in Bali, but knocked off in China and sold here by Mali. Portable gazebos with book-reading matrons, selling cheap trinkets for gullible patrons. Smart little planes that fly back to the owner, bargain Hessian bags for everyone's shoulder. Old books by the hundred from the Mills and Boone stable, and milk crates of vinyls with Pat Boone on the labels. At least that's what you buy. At least what you buy is fresh and organic. Real bee-made honey with the odd leek still in it. Rhubarb, tomatoes, pot plants and flowers, clothes made for hippies in middle-class houses. To market, jiggity jig. I looked and I looked, I found no fat pig. Just a small smiling glass one made of colourful tiles with the look of a cynic that saw me coming for miles. Now I'm going to invite Sam to come up. This is a true story. Some poems write themselves because this is a true story which Sue and I witnessed in the front bar of a hotel at Walker. And Sam, being a deputy principal at Tamworth High School, is just the fit for this poem. So it's called Wednesday Arvo in the front bar.
I knew a bloke.
Which bloke?
The bloke who worked for Stevie.
Hoy, the brickie.
Yeah, boy, he told me.
His brother, he was a teacher, right?
Right, and he reckoned his brother,
The teacher.
yeah, the teacher, he reckoned his super would pay him wage for the rest of his life.
Yeah?
As good, like as when he was working.
Nah, fair dinkum.
Fair income. And this brother, right,
Right.
he's been overseas 5 times.
Yeah?
Yeah, and a new car every few years.
Oh, good wicket.
Yeah, good wicket. Teacher, of course.
Teacher, yeah, well, knock off early.
Indeed. 3:30, we'd hardly beat him home.
Well, only by a few minutes.
Half hour, mate?
Good half hour.
Still, holidays, isn't
Yeah, every second week.
it? At least.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is turn up.
Yeah, turn up.
Deal with them kids.
Jesus.
I
reckon they
earn
earn
it.
I was going to leave this out because Simon mentioned it, but it's actually one of my favourites. When I was teaching, I had a big focus on the fact that we had focus, as we had to, on changing things for women and girls. But the problem was that boys got left behind. And it's a sociologist such as Richard Fletcher, I think his name is, from University of Newcastle, and his family services unit said that if it was possible to fix the problems that boys have, we won't get toxic men. So focusing on boys is a smart way to go. And I saw this all too often, and in some of the schools, a lot of the schools I taught, I saw lovely little boys and their bigger brothers, and the relationship with the two in the two was very hard to understand how they could be in the same family. So this is called the hardness myth. I'll just add at this point too that I think instead of the word hard, when we're talking about men, we should replace it with the word resilient. Okay? Hardness will break. Resilience finds a way of bending and still surviving and moving on. So I'm not saying here that men don't need to be resilient, be tough, but not hard. So the hardness myth. It's always hard to explain because we have words bled from us with that first scraped knee. When we try to scream feelings but are strangled by external genitals and the disapproval of Anzacs and other warriors sent to battlefields or farm fields or sporting fields by their fathers and fathers' fathers, uncles, older brothers, such that little boys should not weep for wounded knees. Little boys who become men, battered and bruised by expectation and burdened by every yell they could not scream, every plea that they could not make for comfort, for fear that they might become soft and know the power that softness brings. Hard instead, disconnected from the release of explanations, they store their screams, contain their misshapen rage behind walls so thick you can see right through them into a Finkelstein blackness of no escape. Now, by chance, just because I sang a song and held my hand still for a butterfly to catch her breath, I escaped to raise boys with soft hearts, who will raise boys with soft hearts. Softness fills empty spaces. Softness bends, adapts, learns, shares. Hardness can only be what it is formed to be, and then it breaks. It breaks the bones, the spirit, the love of those who misconstrued, those who bled to plead for promises to be kept, or change that never came, or softness to infect before death between a rock and a hard man's place, where a wounded knee still bleeds. Righto, we're getting on. I don't think Sue thought I'd actually do this poem, I'm not going to. This is a poem that I've actually put music to. Well, I haven't, I've grabbed a tune from somewhere else, but I'm not that smart. This is my ode to HRT. You better watch out, the next time I cry, I'll be all crazy hormones and I'm telling you why, because menopause has finally hit town. I'm getting him pissed and I'm doing him twice. Here's where we find out if I'm naughty or nice, because menopause has finally hit town. I plan to kill you when you're sleeping, or even better, when I'll awake. I know if you've been bad or good, so be bad for badness sake. Menopause has finally hit town. 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 You better not shout at the TV tonight while I'm in the kitchen with a sharp knife, because menopause has finally hit town. Don't look at me sideways and waste time asking why. Anything you tell me starts a 10-hour cry. Menopause has finally hit town. I'm burning up like Hades. I'm gone too close to gone insane. Life is not worth living. Well, I'll wear white jeans again. Menopause, I'll let that bit out. You better watch out. The next time I cry, I'll be all crazy hormones. I'm telling you why, because menopause has finally hit town. I love him, but I'm gonna kill him! Now from that, this was written for my dad. And in fact, the book is dedicated to my dad, who died 4 years ago. Wonderful bloke. Called When the Time Came. I'm perplexed, for when the time came, parting was strangely comforting. You, author of the largest case of my defining memory. You, my first teacher of life's lessons. You, the model I so often ignored in order to demand my individuality. You, who shaped the first me and tolerated subsequent renditions. You, who never seemed to get old until it was too late. When it was, slipped bits betrayed you, but we retrieved the missing. You, ignored the gaps, eager to petition reality. You, scared of blame, no one offered, grace pressured by oblivion. You, no one looked, everyone cared. You earned both in your terrified bravery. Until a 2 a.m. call killed you. And we boxed a room of leftovers of what you thought was you. You in grass clippings and whiskey and laughter and wisdom and tears. You, alive as I live, my forever September dad. You, wheeled by numbered caps to your only backseat ride. Me, no one crying, released to laugh and remember us. Two more serious poems, and then I'm going to introduce Sue, who, those have looked at the book, she's done some illustrations for some kids' poems, which I've got in the back. Are you okay? I'm okay. I wasn't. I don't sleep well. I worry in vivid colours. Have anxiety. Take pills. I do breathing exercises. I do progressive muscle relaxation techniques. I meditate. I exercise, but I don't do it enough. I don't do any of it enough. I'm guilty about that. And I'm helped in my guilt by doctors and the gloriously fit and the well-meaning people who have no idea, and all the $180 an hour mob with their standing down secretaries and their chairs that put the view behind you. And little voices. Shh, don't tell anyone about the little voices. I'm okay. I was shit yesterday, but thanks for asking. It helps. It's just a pity you don't ask more than once a year. Now I'm going to put markers on myself. I actually think in 5 published books and 15 odd years of actually publishing poetry, this is the best poem I've ever written. So whether you do or not, doesn't matter, I do. So this is called Tuesdays. Tuesday afternoon ruffled through her assorted loneliness, like so many Tuesday predecessors. Mondays made sadness understatements, while salvation lived at the end of the week. But it was always a Tuesday that would end it. Alone with the same problems, the same solutions, the same little bottle of assassins, a brittle childlike blinkered view betrayed by her strong adult grip. Press, twist, let those drops of freedom loose. A thought passed by as though it might escape, but as it paused playfully, she grabbed it like a slow butterfly, turned it over, considered it, without perceiving the beauty, the alternative it offered. Who would care? A deep handful, swallowing the question with them, washing them down with a single long, slow gulp of Jack, sending them off to calm her agony, to quiet the noise. Do we care now? So many Tuesdays, waiting for someone to care. Friday was for music, Saturday was for sex, Sunday was for church, Monday was for regret. And on Tuesday she always needed someone to care, but Tuesday always came, but not a voice, not a cuppa, not a single hug, not one listening ear. Patch nuzzled, his warm fur brushing skin at a torn denim knee. then crawled in his own time to her lap, her arms, head to her neck, his motor running. So often it had been enough, but not this Tuesday. Eyes stinging, she sleeved the regret away, looked across the brown river bend, took an unintended lean back against Grandpa's favourite river gun. The sneaky beginning of an afternoon breeze kissed her gently goodbye. Swish, swallow, gulp, whiskey beer. Closing her eyes in trouble, her breathing slowing, she started the long sleep other Tuesdays had promised. She was gone by dusk. Didn't see Pop Pepperbridge ride up the paddock. Didn't see her neighbour's tears. Didn't hear his sobs, his old soul breaking. Couldn't accept his distraught apology, uttered through an uncharacteristic cursing, crouching there by Jimmy's tree, for not checking on her earlier. He knew she hated fucking Tuesdays. She sat there in the last rows, freshening breeze moving her hair, brushing her face, tidying her quiet smile. Peaceful. Free. Sue, if you want to come up. We're currently working on a book of Sue's illustrations and my poems. Sometimes I write the poem and she does the illustrations, sometimes she does the illustration and I do the poem. So this one is from, we did three in this book, this one's called Billy the Dinosaur. There he is. Unfortunately in the book he's all black and white, but because I'm too tight to do it in colour. Billy the Dinosaur. Billy the frilly dinosaur pranced about and had a very silly habit. He'd hop and flop and pretend that he was a little rabbit. Billy's friends would laugh and fall about, especially when he'd eat carrots and wear a pair of bunny ears or dress in a fluffy jacket. His friend said, "Bill, you're quite a dill, and it's not your frills you've known. We'll change your name to not quite the same because you're no longer the frilly dinosaur." That's what happens when you muck about with your actions and your actions become a folklore. That's why Bill is known still as Billy the Silly Dinosaur. Now, Billy the Silly Dinosaur could really be quite funny, but he'd sometimes take a joke too far, like when he said, "I can make honey," and trapped a great big swarm of bees inside his dino tummy. He got so badly stung inside it made him feel really crummy. Billy the Silly Dinosaur was fond of eating trees because they were green and juicy and didn't squirm or sting like bees. He'd eat leaves all day and in the night, when if the cold didn't make him freeze, it sometimes made the other dinos scared from the knocking of his knees. Billy the Silly Dinosaur was famous throughout his life, so lady dinosaurs came to play, hoping to be his wife. Then came the day he got carried away, married Millie and changed his life. Now Billy the Silly and Millie the Shrilly have Tilly and Willie and Philly and Jilly and Bruce. Billy really is a silly dinosaur.
And then I read, then circle all the bits the kids or parents or grandparents will be looking for in the future. So, it's obviously got to have all the bits that are in the poem. That's number one, can't do anything out because they stick like Where's Wally, they go looking for all the bits. And then after that, I can do whatever I like and be creative. So I've got research children's books and other illustrators and see how other dinosaurs are being portrayed in books, kids, just to see what competition is like. And then I usually go to on Google coloring books on dinosaurs because it gives some really simplified shapes that I need to work on. So I don't actually copy one particular one, but I might steal an eye from one and a tail from another and just kind of look at how to put together my viewing. And once I've drawn it, check a few goes to get it right. I then choose the medium that I want to work in. Because I was down a rabbit hole of collage at the time, my artistic issues at that time, I had to do collage, so that's all I was thinking of. I spent about over 100 hours looking at YouTube on collage before Billy came onto my desk. You know, Judy Baker, you know, what she'd done in her books that she put out there, all of it, good, bad or indifferent, I just been down that rabbit hole. So the next thing was to, after drawing him, was to create segments. So then cutting into segments. And then I created my own papers, collage papers, just by painting or whatever. This bit here is tissue paper, the red bit, is tissue paper that had been crumpled and placed on this body segment and then painted over white. I think I might have painted, no, I think I crumpled the white and painted over the red as one segment. And then I went with a Hawaiian shirt, real waistcoat, and put that bit together. And then, you know, the filling next, so a little bit of lace with the sewing kit, and then all the rest of the bits and pieces. So once all my bits and segments were done, I could then put them back together and paint them. So that's it. So I really want to collaborate with Peter on children's cultural illustrator because when I go looking to buy children's cultural books for my grandchildren, at the moment there's not a lot there. It's real good. I mean, in the 80s there was like Unreal Banana Peel and Sugar Right, Vegemite and Revolving Monks. There's all lots and lots to choose from. And now there's not very much, and not very much is Australian. So I'm quite interested in us collaborating. So I have to poke him for the next poem because he's caught up in calling social satire instead. And I just want to build children's poems. So we're both ex-primary school teachers. We've read so many poems to children. So we kind of know what we're doing. I just got to wait for the next one to come. So he's given me 5 poems. I've just done 4. So yeah, and I don't know which medium I'm going to work in until I see the poem and what's asking from me. And then I spend a lot of time walking and showering, thinking about it, and then I get started.
Thank you, Sue. I'd like to invite now to the stage the Honourable Kevin Anderson MP, Member for Tamworth.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, and good afternoon, everybody. And I too would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, recognise we are in Tamworth country, and thank you for the custodianship of the land which we gather here today. Well, what an afternoon it's been, and what a delight it's been. Simon, to pick up on a couple of your points, I think, you know, poems at a social distance has given you months and months and months at the altar or lectern or wherever you are to be able to then spread the good word, because I think there is just literally volumes in here for you to take from it. And one that I picked up on in terms of language, that you talked about, you know, church versus business. You know, we're workshopping this, we're planning that, we're doing this, we're doing that. In part of my work, I work in water. So water literacy is something that I've learned and have been learning about. And it's water literacy versus plain English. And I've had water boffins sit on one side of the table and water boffins sit on the other side of the table. And at the end of an hour, they've said to each other, "We don't understand what you're talking about." And they've said to them, "We don't understand what you're talking about." And I said, "I think we may have a problem here, people. Let's break it down and get down to some plain English and about what does the work that they do, and in this case, the church or businesses or whatever, the work, how does that come back to the community? And how can a community benefit from that work? And it's no different from what Peter's done here in his latest book, Poems of the Social Distance. How does Peter's work relate to the community? How does Peter's work relate to each individual going through their special time or the unique time of their life? And that time of their life where it may not have been 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or things are happening in their family, which is now impacting upon them, in which they need to deal with. So it's quite interesting to hear how each would relate. And one part, Simon, you talked about too, particularly in Peter's poem, Smells Like Aging Teen Spirit, where they all came around. That's not the first time that I've heard that. Graham Connors is a great Australian country music singer, and I'll talk a little bit about how I think this music correlates with poems and writing and art and so on. In his song, Graham Connors' song, The Great Australian Dream, he talks about going and touring in the outback, and there's a bus of kids with hats on backwards, and he keeps catching up to them, and they're caught somewhere in between Beverly Hills 90210 and The Great Australian Dream, which is very similar to Smells Like Aged Teen Spirit. So it's incredible to think that you're writing about real issues that we're facing. I like, and I had a look through the poems and I skimmed a couple, read a couple. But what I will be doing is going back at different times and just reading them and absorbing and getting further into what the meanings are. And I didn't realise, like I was reading some of them and coming up with my own interpretation of what I thought that poem was about. And then when I got to the back of the book, I saw the poet's notes. I went, that's nothing like what I thought that was about. But that there is the uniqueness of what each particular poem means to each particular person. It's not one size fits all. And they are the words that are crafted to be able to connect with that particular person at that particular time in their life. And Peter talks a lot about social distance, talks a lot about being happy in his own space and being away from crowds and so on and so forth. But in his own special way, he connects very deeply and personally with his work. And we're seeing that. And while it may not be his personal reflections on someone else, the interpretation of that particular personal connection that he puts out there is quite unique in its own individuality. I liken a lot of the work back to music. You know, when you think about people that write, when you think about musicians, you think about artists and painters and the personal touch, the personal in-depth feelings that they would bring out in what they are particularly doing at that time. With music, people write music in times of great sorrow and in times of great jubilation. There are songs that you go, oh, I can connect with this song. And then painters are the same. When they are painting, quite often it's from somewhere deep within that they are painting. And sometimes that abstract piece of art that you have no idea what you're looking at has a very deep and personal meaning to someone else. And it's the same as wine. One glass of red, thankfully, is not like another glass, although they are the same colour. And that's what makes them so unique. So all these different aspects of the artists in terms of the way they portray, the way they present, and the deeply personal presentation. Because as we're seeing here today with Poems of the Social Distance, and this is another in the fine collection of Peter's that he's brought out, he's putting himself out there. He's putting himself out there for people to judge, whether he would like that or not. People will judge. Oh, that's a good poem, that's not a good poem, this is a great collection. I love this book. So it's a very personal thing, it's a very difficult thing to do, particularly when you're a very personal person in terms of what and who you are. And as we were talking earlier, there was something like 230 poems that he had to choose from to put this one together. And the question was, which ones to leave out? Not the ones to put back or to put in, the ones to leave out. There's a lot of music in here. You know, in particular, if you have a look at A Love Struck Romeo by Dire Straits, you know, and you can hear and feel and see his love of music when he writes through here. And with Lindsay as well, in the key of E. And there's a part there that, and I know Simon spoke about it, but I too would like to do a piece, and I would get a different part of this particular poem that struck me because of what I do from time to time and make a fool of myself when I get up and play a bit of music, you know. And sometimes they clap, sometimes they don't. And they sit there in great wonderment. But Lindsay in the key of E, I particularly like this one here. His solo slashes through us with so much more than skill. Bluesmen know it's not skill which comes to play, it's the soul of broken dreams wandering the fretboard healing. Each bent string a cry for help or an appeal for repentance. The map of the pathway home or the solace of experience. So he's expressing what he's doing when he's playing. And you can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it in terms of what they do. So that's what I took from there. And also I got from this book, Likes Water. Peter likes water. As long as it doesn't have surf involved. But there's a lot of that through there. And Safe in Your Harbour on page 51. I took from that the vulnerability and drawing strength from a partner while battling day-to-day struggles. And I went to Pete's notes, and it's completely different. But that's what I took from that. Streaming, again, refers to water. And here, and I stopped and I read this a number of times. And it's on page 54. And it's part of, again, where it comes down to mostly gulping seawater each time you see your calendar this week. And so it goes on. But that feeling of gulping seawater, you know what it's like when you're in the sea, you know what it's like when you're in the water, and you inadvertently take a breath and you get a mouthful of water. It's a shocking feeling. But to put that so eloquently like that, mostly gulping seawater, is quite incredible. But Pete, again, I think it's about connectivity. It's about who you are, what you do, and what you do for us with words. And I like the part of your biography as well, where it says you left for Armidale in the late 70s, trained as a teacher, graduating with honours in drinking and letters to the editor. And taught for 20 years in New South Wales public schools, just as an afterthought. Well, now I'm not sure why that's in there, but it's definitely there and I can absolutely see it. And the afterthought for 20 years taught in New South Wales public schools. But look, it's an absolute honour to be here. And you know, when we talk about music, poetry, writing, artists, painting, it is a unique space that people get into. And people hear, feel, think, and take away different messages from the same line, the same piece of music, the same glass of wine. And I like what you say. If one single thought can hold your hand when you're afraid of the dark, then sunrise isn't that far away. And for many of us, who has not done that? It is with great pleasure and an honour to be able to officially launch Peter Langston Poems at a Social Distance. And I recommend it's a pleasure. there for thank yous, but I think I should say thank you to everyone for being here and being an audience at about 5 minutes to 2. I was wondering how that was going to go, but I really appreciate you being here. Not so much to fill the seats, although that's nice, but it's wonderful to be able to read my words to you, and I don't perform them because that's not part of my gift. Like up the back there, you can do that, Mick. Catch him down the street sometime. Bloody fabulous poet. It's not my gift to do that, my gift is the writing of it. So to have some people here that I can read these poems out to and get a feel for what that may be doing or not doing for you is pretty special for me, so thank you. Thank you to the library who continue to be wonderful supporters of the arts in Tamworth, and certainly absolutely brilliant supporters of me over the years. Between you and Collins, I wouldn't be known at all if it hadn't been for the wonderful support you guys have given me and the opportunity to do this sort of thing. To Simon for the foreword and your eloquence earlier on. I did wonder several times who you were talking about, but I'm going to watch the video back and just assume it's me. And Kevin, also for you giving up your time this afternoon and coming on and launching the book. It's a pretty, for me, a pretty powerful thing that that person in your position and doing the job you do, and Kevin and I talked about this before, I don't necessarily vote for Kevin, but I really do admire the fact that he is immersed in his community and is a local member in the truest sense of the word. And I think we're lucky because there's an awful lot of places out there that don't have their colleagues do that. So whether you agree with politics or not, the way he applies that is fabulous. So thank you to all those people. Give yourselves all a big clap. Now, we're going to draw the raffle, which is for my first 4 books. Sneaky, I haven't put in the 5th one. You've got to buy it at the back. Sam is going to be up there manning the merch tent, table, whatever it is. Yes, no credit card facility, sorry folks, only cash. And if you can't, that's fine, don't care, just go do it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. You've saved me from doing a lot of my event sheeting, which is always a pleasure for me. Can I trouble you to draw our lucky door prize?
From the bottom, to the back,
Ooh, that's probably mine. We have number 11.
What number?
Number 11. And as Peter said, his books are on sale just over there. We also have an afternoon tea available just behind the stage here, so please feel free to stick around and have a chat with us all. Thank you very much, everyone.